all that in here somewhere or another.
Nothing interesting happening in the world at all.
No, there's steak dinner up there, but
No.
I know. Yeah, just a few things.
I think I oversee it, but I went online.
Mhm. Yeah, that was something.
Trucks, buses, and fire trucks. And it is,
The CEO of Overstock resigned
who's
so that it could go public
Kentucky, I think.
information about, having been approached
This
by
guy he
government
collects
officials.
McCabe.
the whole Rio.
I think it was No, was it McCabe or
He
Stroke?
refused to say what
He
this-
did give the name. It was either
eventually-
McCabe or Stroke. Yeah,
Something led back to Strzok, maybe not directly.
that's who it was. He was asked directly by him because I was listening to him talk about it today. And he was actually asked to continue the relationship with this Russian spy.
Yes, Maria Butina.
Yeah. Yeah, in order to further what they were doing. So here's, everybody, Trump and Russia. And yet here's the Obama administration's top FBI officials ordering a private citizen to continue in a relationship with a known Russian spy so that they could get information, hopefully to bring up dirt on the Trump campaign.
Amazing.
But there's no Russian collusion with the Obama administration or the Hillary campaign. It's all Trump, Russia. You can see how CNN made that their lead story. Not.
And then I guess CNN hired Comey, or not Comey.
McCabe. That's where
McCabe,
McCabe
that's-
came in. They hired McCabe.
Did they?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, that's all just to pay him back because of, he's been thrown out for unethical behavior, lying, all that sort of stuff, and discredited. So, hey, for CNN, those were his job credentials, that's job qualifications.
Right.
Wow.
Being able to lie.
Dishonest, lost his job for lying.
For loss of scruples.
Yeah, no scruples. Wow, this is the kind of guy we want.
So he's the 10th FBI and or CIA official hired by CNN. So he's in quote unquote good company there.
Yes. Meanwhile, Fox News has brought on Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Excellent.
So, and you know that.
And you know where all the
just terrible.
controversy will be about
Yeah.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Exactly.
Former press secretary, how could you?
But it is interesting, CNN, if it weren't for being played at airports and waiting rooms and things like that, they'd have hardly any viewers at all. That's the bulk of their viewership.
Well, remember, it used to be that the only news you could get in a hotel
was CNN.
And then Trump's going to raise tariffs on China because, they've been bad.
Yeah, they're trying to one up him with some things. So the stock market took a dive today. It was heading up, but it took a dive. And if you think about it, this is the time to engage in a trade war, especially when you've got the better hand. Not wait until you're holding a weak hand, and not wait until you're in the midst of the election. Because you couldn't do this very effectively next year at this time. But right now, he's got over a year before the actual election. He's got time to.
Devil's advocate over here. All the experts say that's bad luck.
But see, he can do this right now. China's over a barrel because they desperately need the money that they were getting from us in order to fund their military buildup and all the things that they're doing. Because see, for China, they're using their trade to bleed us to fund their military buildup until they don't need us anymore. That's what's going on with China.
And
They're
they're never going to stop needing us.
No, but see, they may reach the point where the generals think that we now can withstand a military threat from the United States, that we're now more powerful. And there's the belief amongst the Chinese that the 21st century belongs to China, that they are essentially supposed to be the next world superpower,
No.
and that we're to go the way of England. That's what's really believed in a lot of places in China, and not just in China. So,
That's what they've been taught from birth.
but many of the things that China has right now, for instance, much of their space program and advanced missile program
They stole
would,
from us.
well, they'd steal it from us. The
Pay for it.
Clinton administration gave it to them for money. They bought it from us. Because remember when Al Gore said, "Oh, I didn't know this was going on," when he was in the meetings with the Chinese
Yeah,
and they were giving all our
That one
secrets.
guy who was
He
sitting
said, "Well, I
there.
was drinking a lot of iced tea. I must have been in the restroom." That was his defense. I drank a lot of iced tea. That's how the Chinese walked away with all of our military secrets, and we walked away with a pocket full of cash for the Clintons, foundation and election campaign and all that. The media didn't want to, dwell on that too much. But it doesn't just stop with China, because what happened then was the Chinese have a vested interest in North Korea being a thorn in our flesh. So what they did was they allowed certain missile technology to go to North Korea, which has now enabled North Korea to put, I believe, at least 2 satellites in space that have a polar orbit, which means they go north-south. Actually, they go from the south to the north. And they orbit the Earth, which brings them, as the Earth is revolving this way, they're orbiting this way. So it means that they orbit right over the United States from south to north periodically, every day.
Eventually it'll go over each location.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it even gets better, because the actual satellites that they have up there very closely resemble a design that the Russians fielded during the Cold War, which was basically a nuclear weapon platform where they could drop or not drop, but have a nuclear weapon in space that would blow up and cause an EMP attack upon the United States. This is what Russia developed during the Cold War, and the North Korean satellites, both of them, are very similar in design and following the right orbit for an EMP attack. EMP attacks electromagnetic pulse, where they explode at 300 kilometers in the air over the central United States, and it basically knocks out nearly all of our power grid across the entire country with one nuclear explosion that doesn't even have to come down. You don't have any chance to react to it because it just happens. And then, of course, that only destroys the power grid. And a commission studying electromagnetic pulse threat a couple of years ago calculated that upwards of 90% of the United States population would die within a year. And it sounds horrendous, but that's because everybody that's dependent on electricity, think of all of the people who are on life support. And you say, well, the backup generators will kick in. No, the EMP fries all the electronics. And they're all dependent on computers, or all dependent on chips. All that's fried. Everything
And then
above the
what
transistor, transistor
machines
and
are
up.
working, you won't be able to get gasoline out.
Yeah, and you can't pump gasoline out because most of the pumps use electronic chips and stuff in them to run the gas pump. So you would have to have some way of pumping it out by hand, from there. And then, how many cars would have their electronics fried? And so, do you see how
In
that goes?
3 days, the millennials will die because of no Facebook.
No, that'd be about 3 hours. That'd be about 3 hours. See, that's because you're not a millennial. You don't see that. It'd be 3 hours. What was it that Babylon Bee said? Miracle Teen survived, so many hours or whatever without social media. But so that's what North Koreans are doing. Well, then it goes even beyond that, because the North Koreans' nuclear program, every step of the way, practically, the Iranians have been there. Iranian military and government and technical people have been there at all of their research and development and launches and things. And that's why the missiles that the Iranians are fielding right now that can reach most of Europe their design is based on North Korean missile technology, which came from China, which came from Al Gore's frequent trips to the bathroom because he ate too or drank too much iced tea. See how it all ties back? And of course,
And you know where tea comes from? China.
that's right. It's a conspiracy. So now, just as a coincidence, both the Russian, or both is more than both, the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese, and the North Koreans have all been studying electromagnetic pulse attacks against the United States. Russia sells a missile launcher container that can be packed on a container ship, looks like a normal container. And when you put it in, you put it up on the top so it's got access to it. And the person goes up there, punches in the code, the container opens up, and it's a missile launcher. You could put you don't need a long range ballistic missile that goes from somewhere in Iran all the way to the United States, or from North Korea all the way to the United States, or from China or Russia all the way to the United States. All you need is a container on a ship that launches a short range missile, which they all have, off the coast of the United States. You can do it with a hot air balloon 30 kilometers up in the air. It won't take out the entire United States, but it would take out, you could float it in over the eastern seaboard and take out pretty much the entire eastern seaboard. And you could do the same thing on the west coast. So there's all these things. And the Iranians have been practicing launching missiles straight up in the air to gain as much height or altitude as quickly as possible before exploding. Why would they be doing that? And if you put a nuclear warhead on the tip of it and you launched it off the coast of the United States, maybe simultaneously East Coast, Gulf of Mexico, and West Coast, you would devastate this country. Maybe that's some of the reasons the United States is not a major player in the Indo-Pacific.
Even if you just took out the West or the
Just
East
took out
Coast.
the East Coast. 75% of America's power is generated in the east part of the United States. So think what that does. Plus, it overloads the grid system. Things start collapsing, and of course,
If you took
food
out New
production
York
comes
City
to a
and
halt.
Washington.
Yeah, financial markets melt down. Oil prices surge. Stock market. Stock market is it's all electronic. It's gone. They have backups. I think they have a backup system in Chicago, probably elsewhere as well. But still, I mean, you have the potential of losing all of that, the economic impact. And how long does it take? Let's say that Cleveland is completely without power right now, just boom, right now. How long would it take in Cleveland if it happened right now before riots began? How many days without electricity, without anybody coming in with food, without anybody coming in with water? You say, well, we've got plenty of water. The lake's right there. Right. So you're living in government housing and you're used to turning the spigot on anytime you want, and you turn it on and the water pressure dwindles to nothing because there's no pumps pumping water into the pipes. What are those people going to do? Are they going to walk with buckets to Lake Erie? Or are they going to be?
Well, and even if they did, they have to treat it somehow.
Well, they won't even think about that. So what diseases come in then? Cholera
Mhm.
and typhoid and and the other thing too, the sewage system. A lot of us live in a place where you have a septic tank and you have a well. Okay, your electric's gone. You can still get water out of the well. There's ways of doing it, but and there's ways of flushing your toilet when you don't have water coming in. You can collect rainwater, pour it down, things like that. But what about people who have no well? People who have city sewer system, and when the pumps stop working on the city sewer system, and stuff doesn't go down the pipe anymore.
I'll be riding out to my brother's house in Rootstown. He's got all that, so he's
Well,
good.
yeah. So you want to get out of the city?
No, you'd be walking.
Yeah, you'd be walking or riding a bike. He's got a bike.
He's got a bike.
He'd be on his bike. See, but how many people would be not? They'd be clueless. They wouldn't know what to do. They'd
They
be
wouldn't be
absolutely
smart enough
clueless.
to leave.
They'd be sitting there waiting for somebody to come and take care of them
Yep.
because you've got so many people who are being raised to think somebody's going to take care of you all the time. No self-reliance. You know, a lot of that being drummed out of the younger generations.
Well, look at the problems when we had Hurricane Sandy go through, and it was coming, and people knew it was coming, and they told people, you need to get extra provisions. You know, you're probably gonna lose your utilities and all that, and
Look what happened in Houston.
Mm-hmm. And then the grocery stores, people say, well, you know, people are going to surge to the grocery stores. Well, who's going to open the stores? The cash registers don't work. The lights don't work. The freezers are all out. And
A lot of the stores have those electric time locks.
so they start busting the windows and looting the store, but all the perishables, how long does the stuff in your refrigerator last if there's no power? Not that long.
Not even
How about the stuff in
24
your
hours.
freezer?
Yeah.
Not that
The
long.
sad part about your scenario is for a few $100 million, they could keep it from happening.
Exactly. And
Done.
thankfully, the Trump administration is now moving in that direction, and some electric companies are moving in that direction.
Well, that's why it hasn't happened so far, because most of the electric is privately owned,
Mhm.
and they won't spend the money. They don't want to spend the money.
There's a few that are. I heard a guy in the radio one time. He worked for one of the electric companies in the Pacific Northwest. He said their company was working on it,
Now,
but they're not the only. They're one of the few. So
now is the Air Force still stocking up on all those vacuum tubes?
the military has been the largest stockpiler of vacuum tubes in the world, and the reason is vacuum tubes are immune to electromagnetic pulse attacks.
Yeah, because that's what they took. That's what they had on the lunar landing.
Yeah, they have a lot of vacuum tube technology.
Mhm.
So, but you know, you remember the old TVs and radios? You had to turn it on and wait for it to warm up, right?
Which gets me because I'm sitting there. I'm like, you know, wasn't Obama pushing for this digital TV stuff? Get rid of the analog system that wouldn't be affected.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
But see, you got all this stuff going on, and it's easy to worry about that, but we shouldn't, because our hope is not in what the government or the military is going to do. It's in what God's going to do. And
Yeah,
you know,
but,
think about it. What would happen if that took place and the rapture took place at the same time?
ooh.
Nobody knows what's going on,
Yeah.
because you know, a lot of times, because when you yeah, let's go over to 1 Corinthians 4 there. I mean, think about this for a minute. I'm sorry, 1 Thessalonians 4. 1 Thessalonians 4, when he says in second verse 13, but I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. So there's comfort in that. I mean, if something like this took place, you know, an electromagnetic pulse attack, devastation. I mean, it would be devastation. Some people would last longer than others. People living out here would be better off than people living in the middle of town. But what I'm getting at is the rapture takes place and we're caught out of the world. I'm not turning over there, but 1 Corinthians 15 says it's in a moment and twinkling of an eye, right? We're caught up. We disappear. Now, we talk about this on the radio, and I know some of the people who work at the radio station, they hear people talk about this, about the believers being caught out of the world, and to them, it's just a crazy story. It's a crazy mythological thing. and they don't really believe that it's going to happen. And I've had conversations with some of the people we've had over the years that have worked, Sunday nights with our program where we have, it's kind of quiet, we have time to talk, and a lot of them it's like, that's too unbelievable. That's kind of like far-fetched fantasy, and they kind of look at it that way. It's just maybe I could put it this way: it's too fantastical, in that sense. So, but if all of a sudden they see it happen, people who disappear, and they start thinking, was that the rapture? Now if the electrical grid was fully functional, don't you think it would at least make the news that all these people have disappeared, and reports of people disappearing, cars, drivers disappearing, people coming home and somebody's not there, or somebody's in a meeting with somebody. Here's footage, somebody's cell phone from this meeting, and the person, you can see them vanish, and there's been a lot of movies and books and stuff done where, they have the person vanish, and there's a pile of clothes laying there on the, where that person was, things like that. And it's all kind of speculative what'll happen, what people will see, but it's clear that people will disappear when the rapture takes place. Now, we also know that the Antichrist is going to cause people to believe a lie.
Yep.
And he's going to try and cover this up. So, and we've talked about it before, there's going to be plenty of pastors and priests who go out and say, if that had been the catching away of Christians, why are we still here? Obviously it wasn't, because we're still here. And, Dr. and Right Reverend so-and-so will all be out there linking hands with the Muslim imams and the Hindus and this group and that group, and saying, see, if God was taking his people out of the world, we'd all be taken away, but we're all here. This just shows that we all need to join together, the basis for one world religion.
Yep.
But if there was an electromagnetic pulse attack, no internet, no radio, no television, no cell phone service, you're somewhere, let's say that you're at the bank and a rapture takes place and you're the only Christian standing in the lobby. Boom, there's a pile of clothes and people look at that going, well, that's weird. What happened? And they review they wouldn't even review the security footage because the cameras would be down, it'd all be gone. But what I'm getting at is they talk amongst themselves. And they go out, their cars don't start. They can't, there's nothing on the radio don't work. They try their cell phone don't work. They have no way of communicating with anybody. Maybe they walk home, they get home, and that neighbor over there who always goes to church, they're not home. And then somebody says, do you think it could have been that rapture thing they talked about? And they say, well, yeah, sure, they're gone, but there's, that guy over there who nobody liked, he couldn't get along with anybody, he was always in trouble, and police were always out at their house, the horrible people, and they're gone too. Yeah, that's right, they were in California, weren't they? Well, maybe these guys were out of town as well. So you see how that can be covered very easily on that, and you're not going to know what's happening around the world because you have no source of information other than, what did you see?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you see?
What's funny, I don't think that'll happen though.
I'm just using that as a what if the rapture
because,
took place in conjunction with an electromagnetic pulse attack.
Yeah, because when you sit there and you think how many nuclear missiles there are that would be unaffected by that because they're in those the silos,
Mm-hmm.
they're like little impervious to something like that. Because those things are things are meant to take a direct hit.
But that's what's happening with the government and the military. That's a different portion of it because the military has some survivability built in. Plus, think of all the troops and stuff that are stationed outside the United States. You got an aircraft carrier group that's circling somewhere down in the Indian Ocean or out on Diego Garcia. They're unaffected by it. Yep. So the government of the United States and military command and control would continue, but they may relocate outside of the United States. I read an article one time or saw a thing one time where they actually had an agreement with Australia that in the event of some kind of catastrophic occurrence in the United States, that they had a place somewhere in Australia, I forget what portion of Australia, where the United States government had an agreement
Oh,
where we would move a chunk of the United States population to Australia to shelter them.
oh yeah, they'd love that. That's probably the, where was it? They were the ones that were tracking, Apollo 11 out of Australia, that, one radio setup that they had.
Well, they had a series of places around the world where they tracked because satellite communications were not as extensive as they are today, for one thing, and they still use a lot of places around the world. But it is interesting when you think about it. You try to think of ways. Well, what would cause people to believe that it wasn't the rapture?
No, I was just referring to the military side of that, because it's like all of a sudden then you'd have no turning back now. Here come the nuclear missiles for everybody.
And that
Yeah.
that very well could be where the United States still would have some formidable military forces
Oh yeah.
to aid. Remember, we talked about the merchants of Tarshish and the young lions thereof to aid, Britain and things like that. So I don't know, but that's why I say when you see this stuff and you get easily overwhelmed by it. But what Paul was writing about here in 1 Thessalonians is people were being, kind of overwhelmed with some kind of fears and.
Yeah, because of Rome.
What was going on with Rome. Plus, let me back up here a second. Let's see here. Paul's preaching to them there, and the situation with Rome, and then they were worried about the people who had died, what happened to them, and so Paul writes this under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit to comfort believers, and that's what he says. Wherefore, comfort one another. He doesn't want us to be ignorant, sorrowing not as others that have no hope. And then he concludes with that in verse 18, wherefore comfort one another with these words. And then, of course, in the next chapter, he right away goes into talking about how we should be watching and waiting and looking at the times, knowing that we're in the right time frame. We're not going to know the day nor the hour, but last Wednesday night, I had the opportunity to speak over at Crusade Baptist in Cockley, and there was, pretty good turnout that was there, and we were talking about this, and I was using as in the days of Lot. Remember that, whereas in the days of Lot, where it's talking about the different things that were going out in the days of Noah. And that was back in Luke 16, I think it was? Or let me get that wrong. Luke. I had the paper here. Or Luke 17. I was close. There we are. Luke 17, verse
48.
I was going to say Luke 17, starting verse 26. Where it says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, also as it was in the days of Lot, that's verse 28. They did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. And that day there, of course, we're talking about, it says the days of the Son of Man in verse 26, and the days, a day when the Son of Man is revealed in verse 30. And we live in the days of the Son of Man, the idea of the last days, because it covers the catching away of the believers. Because remember, both Lot and Noah were pictures of the catching away of the believers before God's judgment comes on the world, because the tribulation is God's judgment on the world. But in Noah's case, remember, he preached, repent, get your hearts right with God, judgment's coming. God's going to destroy this world. The way to escape is to believe and, basically get on the ark. Well, what do we do today? We preach judgment is coming. God's going to judge this world. Destruction's coming on this world. How do we escape? Well, we get into the ark, Christ being the ark. We put our faith in Christ, and he catches us out of the world. They went into the ark. They were lifted up on the floodwaters, lifted up during the time, and then they went in. And when they went in, it began to rain. The judgment came after they went in, and they were safe in the ark. Lot, even though he was a very compromised believer, he still was a believer, and the Bible mentions him in. Find the right thing here. Let me get this other passage here. Oops. Here we are. There it goes. Run slow. Yeah, in 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, this is what, remember, the New Testament is the single best commentary on the Old Testament. There's a lot of people who say, how in the world could Lot be a believer? Look at the things he did. I mean, he was, he had a certain amount of greed, because remember when his servants were contending with Abraham's servants, and they decided to separate, and Abraham said, hey, look around here, pick whatever direction you want to go to, and I'll go the other way. He should have deferred to his uncle in the first place, but he didn't, and he picked what seemed the best place, the well-watered plain where Sodom and Gomorrah was, and he then ends up losing everything, and he escapes Sodom with just his 2 daughters and the clothes on their back, basically. But
yeah, because nobody wanted to go with him.
Yeah, and he had compromised his testimony to such a degree that his sons-in-law laughed at him when he told them that God was going to judge the city. And it says here in Luke chapter 2, where it's talking about turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah in verse 6 into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly. And then it says this in verse 7, and delivered just Lot. Now, it doesn't mean just as in only Lot. It means just Lot as in righteous Lot. And you say, how do you know that? Well, continue. And just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked, verse 8, for that righteous man dwelling among them, in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. So it's Lot was a believer, but he was a compromised believer living in the world, just like many Christians today. And then it continues on, verse 9, the Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. Well, we don't need to continue on much more than that right now, but fact of it being just Lot and being delivered out of there. Let's see here. But he took them out, and then as it said there in Luke 17, it said again in verse 28, likewise also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded, but the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So Lot, the righteous man, the picture of Christians, picture of believers, is removed from Sodom, and then judgment falls. Remember the 2 angels that were there made him hurry, said, we've got to go because God's going to destroy the city and you got to be out of here before it happens. So, the idea that some people try to teach that the church, that believers, Christians, are going to go into the tribulation flies in the face of the example of Noah and Lot being removed, and then the period of judgment comes, because the tribulation is a period of judgment on the earth. It's the judgment against those that rejected Christ. It's the 70th week of Daniel's vision in Daniel chapter 9 to bring judgment and to wrap up everything that God is doing, dealing with the Jewish people. Also brings judgment on the Gentile world that's rejected Christ. Now, people will come to become believers during the tribulation, and some of them will survive the tribulation, and they will be the ones who physically repopulate the earth during the millennial reign of Christ. But when the catching away of believers takes place, then the judgment comes. And we had that again we were over there in 1 Thessalonians, going into chapter 5, where he says in verse 9, but for God hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ. So we're not appointed under wrath.
Right there, that just spelled everything out.
Yeah, and he continues, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Verse 11, wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do. So there's that idea of comforting, again, just like at the end of chapter 4, verse 18, where he said, wherefore comfort one another with these words. So when we're talking about events that surround the catching away of the believers and then judgment coming on the world, God says that we should be comforted by knowing that we're going to be removed prior to the wrath of God, the judgment of God coming on the world. That's what I take from this. And if that's the case, then whether it's an EMP or a war, all-out war, or any number of other things that take place, the fact of the matter is, we are not appointed under wrath. So we're not appointed to be in the tribulation, which is a period of God's wrath being poured out on the world. I was going to say, too, the other thing that's interesting, which is how we know that Luke chapter 17 is talking about the events that take place when the believers are caught out of the world, rather than when the Lord returns at the end of the tribulation. The end of the tribulation, the Bible says, there's going to have been all kinds of things taking place. Massive earthquakes such as the world has never seen. Every island moved, every mountain shaken. There's going to be huge numbers of people killed from war, from natural disaster, from disease, from famine. There's going to be,
all the buildings come down. There's going to be left on another.
The sun scorching the earth. There's going to be all these judgments that you see in the book of Revelation. There's going to be meteor showers and potentially an asteroid or something hitting the earth, things like that. And all these things that take place, so that, as Jesus said in Matthew, when he said, except those days were shortened, there'd be no life left, basically. Nobody would survive it if it went on any longer. That does not sound like what's described in Luke 17, where it says, as it was in the days of Noah, verse 26, he says in verse 27, they did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. That sounds like normal life. Verse 28, likewise also as it was in the days of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So this is normal life. This is what we see happening right now. Normal life. People are eating and drinking and buying and selling and building and planting and marrying and giving in marriage and all of these things taking place. because even though, okay, stock market's shaky right now and there's a threat of this and a threat of that, life continues. Things are still going on. But at the end of the tribulation, it's going to look like things are about ready to just completely come to an end. And if that's the case, here it is, the world is about to go up in flames. And somebody's saying, you know what, I think I'm going to buy that bit of land over there and I'm going to plant it because I think maybe next year, despite all these plagues and stuff will be gone, I'll have a bumper crop. Yeah. They're not going to be thinking about that. They're going to be thinking, can I survive the next several days? Can I survive the next couple of weeks or months? Will I even be alive next year at this time? Will there be a next year? Quite a bit different from buying and selling, planting, eating and drinking, life, marrying, giving in marriage. Yeah, it looks like the world's going to come to an end in a few days. Hey, I hear your daughter just got engaged. Yeah, where are you going to have the wedding? They're not going to be thinking like that.
No.
So
They'll probably be saying, hey, tell your daughter, don't go down that road because there's a Bengal tiger down there. And is he hungry.
So we got all this stuff going on. And in the midst of all that, like he said there in Luke, or 1 Thessalonians twice, end of chapter 4, and there in the middle of chapter 5, wherefore comfort one another. Comfort one another with these words. We should take comfort that when it looks like God's judgment's about to come onto this world, God's going to take us out just like he did Noah, just like he did Lot, just prior to the judgments. So I think that's one of the reasons why that's written there. And in fact, 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 1 there where he says, but at the time and of the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all the children of light and the children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for an helmet the hope of salvation. And that's where he says, for God hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ, died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do. So he's talking here that we should be aware that the Lord's about to come back. We don't know exactly when, but we should be watching and we should be waiting. We should have an awareness. So, and that's, one of the things that when you look at what's happening in the world and you see things setting up that would allow for a one world government, that would allow for a unification of all the religions together, that would allow for the persecution
And that's what's going on now.
Well,
But you got the Pope.
yeah,
The Pope is actually siding with everybody else.
the Muslims and the communists against the rest of the
Israel
Christianity.
and the Christians, believe it or
Mhm.
not. Not all of them just yet. but-
From the UN, remember we mentioned the UN is pumping a lot of money into rebuilding Babylon.
Yep.
They
It
have
would
a
be nice to lose the
goal of
UN.
moving the UN to Babylon. Saddam Hussein spent a lot of money rebuilding Babylon, and we had that one missionary who was a Marine, and he got to spend the night in Saddam Hussein's palace there in Babylon. And so it was kind of a weird feeling, but it said a lot that was built up then, and the UN's put a lot of money into it since then. So building up housing areas and everything, they would have to obviously make a security zone.
Well, we see who's pulling their strings, huh?
Hmm.
So we can see who's pulling their strings.
Well, you got Soros and you got the European elites and a number of people.
57 Muslim nations.
Oh,
They're
Yeah.
like, they'll vote for anything.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, and think of it too. If they thought that there was a good reason that the United States was going to be attacked with an electromagnetic pulse attack. Wouldn't they want to get out if they had reason to believe it was coming?
But why Sodom?
Oh, you mean Baghdad or
Babylon.
Babylon?
Babylon.
That's a good question. Except that Babylon does figure,
Uh-huh.
in the Bible.
They
And,
Talks
saw
about the great city.
Babylon.
Yep.
Ruling. Yeah, and some people think that might be that the goal is that will be the world government's seat in Babylon. It's kind of a central location, up into Asia, up into Europe, down in Africa, kind of central middle of the world. Good evening.
You change your hair.
Yeah.
Looks a little different than your picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just a placeholder,
We just don't know how to drive the frame.
That's true. And you get the job.
Never did. I don't think share this over.
Let's see what.
Item.
You were talking about that get together where all those different religions and that, and the Pope was up there. That was in, you said Utah? Where that was held?
No,
No, the Pope wasn't there, not in Utah.
they just had a thing over in his neighborhood where they.
Yeah, they just had a thing there, the Vatican, I believe.
Like that one guy said, he goes, I believe that Trump is our retreat from God, because if
Mhm.
Hillary would have got in there,
Yeah,
it would have
and
been lights out.
they were definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah.
And he, it's like we talked before, one of the reasons there's such a visceral hatred of him
Mhm.
and anybody that supports him is because they were robbed of, what they thought was going to happen. Because, here's 8 years of the Obamas and their cronies
Driving
all
the
be there. And they're trying to fundamentally change America just like he promised that he would. Turn it into a socialist nation.
Mhm.
And Hillary could have come in now and finished the job. She would have packed, Trump has got 2 people on the court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I don't know how she stays on there.
I don't think that's her.
She's undergoing pancreatic cancer treatments again.
She's cured today.
No, she's cured today? Because I just heard today she just had been to more.
Or lung.
No, I thought they said pancreatic cancer.
That's what she said, pancreatic cancer, anyway.
Because I know she had lung cancer.
It said she didn't require any more treatment today. It's all about.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Yeah,
That could be an interesting way of putting it. Maybe it won't come
Yeah.
anymore. Doesn't
maybe
require
she's
any
reached the
more.
point where you can't, because pancreatic cancer is okay, here's the story right here. Pancreatic cancer. She's treated again for cancer, it says. This was just today. And it says she just completed 3 weeks of radiation treatment at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. It was done on an outpatient basis, which it is. Began August 5, shortly after localized cancerous tumor was discovered on her pancreas. So it was further tests, they said, showed no evidence of disease elsewhere in the body.
Well, they're
So-
in recess right
But she
now.
had
Yeah.
lung cancer
Yeah,
already.
well, they said that she had lung cancer previously, This was detected in early July and then confirmed in late July. But people with pancreatic cancer, what is general prognosis?
Everybody's different prognosis for a Democrat.
Well, it also depends on whether or not they were
Because it's typically not detected till late, but I think things have improved recently.
yeah.
But still,
If
you're
it's detected
usually
early,
talking
they
a
can
couple of
actually,
years.
Well,
the
here's,
one guy said it. Because they can now transplant some of these pancreas.
Can they transplant a different head onto her?
Could be. Like the one guy said, he goes, we're gonna find out sooner or later that that's an imposter, a double. Remember that one guy that doubled for Reagan?
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, according to this, she was treated for colon cancer in 1999, then treated for pancreatic cancer in 2009. Then she had two cancerous growths removed from her left lung. That was last winter. And now she is being treated for pancreatic cancer again. And
Think maybe God's trying to tell her something. Hey, you're gonna be up here soon and you need to do some things.
how old is she? She is
Because I know my dad, he had
86. She's 86 years old, I think. Yeah.
they took cancer out of my dad's kidney.
Mm-hmm.
And this was maybe like not even a year and 3 months before he died. He had a hole in his back.
Yeah. But bringing this
Yeah.
up, and we were talking about if Hillary had gotten in, obviously she would have had the two Supreme Court justices that Trump has already had. But likely with all of this going on with Ginsburg, she would have retired. And then that would have been a third one.
Yeah.
Because they need the courts in order to push through their agenda.
Yeah.
Because it's like we talked about before. There was no legislative action. There was no national election that took Bible reading out of public schools or
Right.
prayer out of public schools or gave us abortion on
adjudicated.
demand. Those were all legal decisions in the Supreme Court. That's where all of that came from.
And it's
Nobody-
all constitutional too.
Yeah, there's no national referendum to allow for same-sex marriage. There's no act of Congress signed by the president that authorized same-sex marriage in this country. Again, legal decisions. The courts have routinely accomplished, the left has routinely accomplished through the courts, which they cannot get accomplished through the ballot box. There was a case out in, what was that? I just heard this today, where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, using a 3-panel court, ruled against them. And then they went to the full court and it still ruled against them. And I think it's going to the Supreme Court. It was just in the news today. It was a win for us. And the reason I bring it up is it shows that even the most left-leaning Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, is starting to become more of a moderate court. It's not so left-leaning as it was. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is the way that the Trump administration has been getting all these people on the courts. President Trump has put more people on the courts, federal courts, than any other president in history. And
It's
he's done it
amazing.
in less than 3 years.
It is amazing what he has accomplished, like
And-
you were saying. Of course, when Reagan got in there, if Reagan would have had the Senate, because he didn't have the House or the Senate for
Mhm.
his entire 8 years.
And they opposed a lot of what he did.
Yeah.
But a lot of what was accomplished in the Obama years is being dismantled because a lot of it was done not by legislative action, but by
What's that?
executive orders.
I was trying to think of that.
And those are being rolled back.
Yep.
That whole title, what was it, the Title 9 or Title 10, which one was it? The Title 10, where remember the Obama Justice Department, along with the Education Department, federal Education Department, Justice Department, sent a letter to every school district in the United States
I remember that.
saying that you must allow Johnny to shower and change and use the restroom in the girls' facilities if Johnny decides today he's a girl. And he doesn't have to have any other evidence that he's a girl except that he says, I think I'm a girl. Call me Joni. And he is to be allowed inside of these facilities. And this one article that I have here is thinking about that. Let's see. This is a school district forced girls to shower with boys. Can't get out of Title IX. Yeah, it is Title IX lawsuit. This was in Altoona, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania State University of Altoona. The College Fix is where this was reported, I guess. But anyway, let me just read this. It says, a federal court permitted a lawsuit to proceed against an Illinois school district. So I guess the school district in Illinois. Against the Illinois school district that allows high school boys to use girls' locker rooms, restrooms, and showers in order to accommodate transgender students. But girls, and keep in mind, we're talking high school here, but girls who don't want to be seen naked by boys got bad news. The judge, this federal judge, ruled that they have no right to, quote, visual bodily privacy, end quote, if the government says so.
Wow.
I mean, is that ridiculous or what?
Well, then
A federal judge.
Judge, take off your clothes right now in front of us all.
Dozens of families sued the Chicago Area Township High School District 211 3 years ago. So what does 3 years ago put us into? The time when that letter came out, because that was in the last
right at the
year,
end.
right in the waning days of the Obama administration. Why would they put a letter out so heavy-handed, threatening all of these schools, every single school district in the country? In the waning days of the Obama administration, they would have never done that unless they were certain that Hillary was going to win. So 3 years ago, this school district said we have to allow boys that claim, I think I'm a girl. We have to allow them to go into the women's locker rooms in the school, change in there, shower with them. And if the girls have a problem with that, it's their problem, not his, because to tell them they can't do that and for the girls to have a problem with that will make him feel like he's less of a woman than they are. Convoluted nonsense, but
It's days of lots.
exactly. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. The immorality, like the days of Lot, and the wickedness in high places, like in the days of Noah. This shows we're in the last days. And it says, so families sued because it let students as young as 14 years old choose to use the locker rooms of the opposite sex. Now, 14 years old, what's that put us down to? About ninth grade?
Yeah.
Ninth grade, around in there, 8th grade, 9th grade, and then that. So no 14-year-old group of boys, a group of 14-year-old boys is going to say, all right, everybody pool some money together here. And everybody, we got $10 from each person. You got 10 of us all together here. Hey, Fred, here's $100. Tell everybody you're really Frederica today so that you can go into the girls' locker room and tell us what's going on.
What it's like.
You don't think that's going to happen amongst a bunch of 14-year-olds or 15-year-olds
There
in the
would be
school?
some that would do it for free.
Oh yeah, that's exactly
With a
right. But,
smartphone on.
oh yeah, you know,
That
you
would
don't
make
think
sure
they're going to
they
do
need
that?
right.
Yeah, they won't even need the bribe. But no. Okay, so it continues. Here's a quote from the lawyers at Alliance Defending Freedom in a background document on the case. All the students must use the restroom with the knowledge that someone of the opposite sex is present or could walk in at any time. Continuing, if our government is powerful enough to command innocent school children to disrobe in the presence of opposite sex classmates, then there will be little it will not be powerful enough to do. They organized a group called Students and Parents for Privacy. 52 families, 136 parents, current and future students who are, they say, being forced to use the restroom or change clothes with somebody of the opposite sex in the room. And so, you know, this is happening, and the case is still there, but this is directly from the Obama administration and the result of that letter going out. And they were told that the girls, if they will not go in, you know, because some schools had said, well, if the person is transgendered and they don't feel comfortable changing in the boys' locker room, and the girls don't feel comfortable with them changing in their locker room, we'll bring them to a place where they can have the privacy, like a third room or restroom where they can go in, like a gender neutral sort of room. And they said no. Forcing them to go into a gender neutral room is saying that they're less of a girl or less of a boy, depending which way they're going. You know, the inmates running the asylum. But
Oh,
Drop
yeah.
their pants and go see if they're less-
well, yeah, so they're pushing this stuff, and it's just going on and on. And whenever somebody pushes back and tries to stand up against this, they're the ones that are persecuted.
Cockroaches do not like it when you turn the light off.
Yeah, here's another case. This just happened recently here. This was in Ohio. See if I can find out what school district this was. But Liberty Counsel had a thing that they had a school district claims they did not punish this boy, but they dragged him out of class for the day and warned him not to correctly identify the biological sex of a classmate again. What happened was,
Let's
Let's
see. He
see.
was one of those mean Christians.
well, here it is. They're sixth graders, okay? This is the sixth grade now.
Oh, boy.
According to a narrative by Liberty Counsel, the school uniformly referred to the gender-confused male, boy A, as a girl and used female pronouns for him. In a redacted letter to the school district, Liberty Counsel said boy A started publicly identifying as a female this spring. It became heavily discussed at the school, particularly by a group of girls in John's class. This is this kid that was dragged out in John's class, who quickly started treating boy A as a girl and frequently discussing his transition. John is also in the class and considered boy A a friend. He was subjected to conversations about these issues constantly on at least a weekly or semi-weekly basis because the girls and boy A sat directly behind him. On May 13th, the girls claimed that taking girl hormones and eventually getting his male parts removed would turn boy A into a girl. John disagreed as a factual matter and said that boy A was not a girl. Another boy agreed that sex is what you're born with and cannot be changed by hormones and surgery. And a third boy, quote, may have said something to similar effect. Their art teacher overheard the conversation, reported John and the boys to the assistant principal, claiming they were bullying boy A, and that a third boy called him a homosexual. So the assistant principal calls John into her office and warned him there might be consequences because he called boy A boy and used male pronouns, and then pulled him out of his physical education class that afternoon in front of his friends and warned him again he'll be punished if he refuses to refer to boy A as a girl. It goes on talking more about what's going on, but I mean, this is you have people in the educational establishment enforcing these things, and these are just a few places.
What'll they insist on next? 2 + 2 being 5?
Yeah,
No, 13.
well, then that the letter P occurs in the word hamster.
Because it's
Hamster.
Yeah.
Hamster.
Well, we say that because that was actually an article where some girl had a meltdown because her boss, her supervisor, told her, in editing her paper, said, here's a few corrections, and by the way, there's no P in hamster. And she says, yes, there is, because I spell it that way. And they even looked up on dictionary.com and showed her that there's no P in the word hamster. And she said, well, they're wrong, because I spell it that way. Even had her mom call in and put her on speakerphone, and her mom say, you don't have to listen to her. She's just mean and doesn't know it goes on about that. So we were joking, saying somebody will get in trouble now because there's no T in the word pizza. So anyway, it's because who really says pizza? No, I mean, it's
the
just,
Emperor's New Clothes.
yeah. And when you, only with a twist. In the Emperor's New Clothes, everybody was just simply afraid of saying it because of what people would think, until the one little boy said, he's not wearing anything. And then everybody finally admitted the truth. In this case, the lawyers are saying, we're going to watch, and if somebody says anything, we're going to persecute them and make it so that people will be, will never say anything contrary. Remember 1984 Newspeak?
Mm-hmm.
You changed the meanings of words, and you eventually reduced the number of words in the vocabulary to the point where you couldn't even think oppressive thoughts because there wouldn't be any words for them. That was in 1984. George was it Orwell's Animal Farm? Who was
Yes, and we're approaching that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
They didn't teach that in school I was in.
Well, yeah, you got through when there were people with sense there. when people learned to read and write.
Yeah, see,
and do
that's,
arithmetic.
I graduated in 82, and none of the stuff that's happening now was happening when I went through. In fact, I took painting and decorating, learned how to plaster and stuff like
Mhm.
that. You go around now, and it's like they got all these,
What? Yeah, the
they just put that thing on Ohio's the State Board of Education. Just put that. I can't think of what that was called. Where now a teacher can sit there and think that your parents need to be evaluated because of the way you are.
Mhm.
What's that called? I can't even think of what it.
I'm not sure what the name of it is, but yeah, there is this.
Yeah,
Remember Hillary Clinton's "It Takes a Village"?
yeah.
The idea is that the state can raise your children better than you can.
Yep.
And that's not unusual. Anybody remember the Hitler Youth? What was the idea there? The state
Indoctrination.
indoctrinated the kids. What did they do in Russia? They did in the Soviet Union. Did the same thing.
And what did those two countries do? They went after the Jews and the Christians. That's. I'm trying to think. I think it was Rabbi Lapid who was talking about that, and he brought up World War I, why the Soviet Union collapsed on itself. He goes, when you look at what they were doing to the Jews at the time, because when you look at Ellis Island, it's like you see all these people who came from Russia, and like 90% of them were Jews.
Mhm.
And he was going on. He was saying
Europe
America
did not want them.
Exactly. And he goes, you have to sit back and you have to take a close look at why America was there in the first place. And he goes, it was an absolute lifeboat
Mhm.
for the Jews. Because he's like, there are more, I think there's more Jews in America than Israel right now.
That's probably true. Well,
Because I
and,
know
and remember when they, the Russian pogroms in the late 1800s,
Mhm.
where they restricted the Jews to live only in certain areas, only do certain work, and they weren't allowed to travel much. So many of them fled, like the musical Fiddler on the Roof. What are they all doing at the end of the movie?
Uh-huh,
The Jews are leaving, and where were they trying to go?
America.
Yeah, and that's based on what actually happened.
Uh-huh.
And as they came into America, America from its very beginning, the navigator that was on the boat with Christopher Columbus,
Yep.
who I think was one of the first persons to set foot, on
Yeah, he
dry
was a
land,
Jew.
was Jewish. And there's some people who even teach that Christopher Columbus was a Jewish man who converted to Christianity because he had the purge in Spain, where a lot of Jews became Christians, at least on paper, so that they wouldn't
Yeah, the
be
Spanish
persecuted.
Inquisition.
Yeah, because they said no Jews were allowed in Spain.
Yep.
And so essentially the New World was opened up, like you said, as a lifeboat, because when New York City
Right
was
at that time,
founded,
too.
when New York City was founded as New Amsterdam by the Dutch,
Mhm.
what happened was that a group of Jewish individuals came there, and the governor of New Amsterdam, he didn't know exactly what to do with them, and he wrote back, sent messages back to the government in what is it, in Holland or whatever, Netherlands, where he said, what should I do with them? And they basically wrote back and said, if they're law abiding and they want to contribute to the building up of New Amsterdam, let them stay.
Mhm.
And so that goes way back in our founding. And then, of course, Rhode Island, which was founded, by Roger Williams and John Clark, and mostly Baptist,
Mhm.
was actually the first
16.
colony, to have freedom of religion, because that's a Baptist principle.
Mhm.
And
Jamestown was founded in 1607.
yeah,
But the knucklehead mayor out of Indiana said it was 1618 when all the slaves were there.
oh yeah, they're trying to talk about that.
And
yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that's a whole other area. But let me get back to Rhode Island a second. They were banished from Massachusetts colony because they wanted to worship contrary to the state church, which was a Congregationalist church. So they were banished to the wilderness, and they ended up, John Williams ended up going to Britain, getting what do they call it, a compact or whatever, so that they could establish Rhode Island as a colony. But they included freedom of religion there. And so Rhode Island became home to what is today the oldest synagogue in North America, I
Yeah.
think, at least the United States, I think North America. And so they've had a home there since the very beginning of Rhode Island. And this country has allowed them. It was a Jewish merchant by the name of Jaime Salomon who actually helped fund the United States Revolution, the American Revolution. Because
Are there any, the
was
signers
it?
of the Declaration of Independence? Weren't there a couple of Jews that signed it too, or?
could be, I'm just not sure. Because Salomon was not a signer, but he was a very wealthy man. And he put a lot of money and even some of his ships into the cause. So, even though Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar say that the Muslims are responsible for our country being what it is and founding of our country and all that, it was the Jews working alongside of Christians that are
Yep.
responsible for the founding of our country.
Well, that's
But when
that's the mentality that a lot of them Christians had. They knew about God's blessing. If you bless the Jewish people, I'm going to bless you, and that's how all that came to be. They knew better. So, and yet today you look at everybody else. They want to get into this Chrislam stuff, and it's
Mhm.
like, wow.
Yeah, and Rick Warren is a big backer of
Yep.
that. And Chrislam, for those who don't know the term, the idea with Chrislam is that the Jews, the Christians, well, actually they're just mostly the Christians and Muslims. The Christians and Muslims worship the same God.
Yep.
They extend it to the Jews. Jews, Christians, Muslims are all the three great Abrahamic faiths. We all worship the same God, and the only thing of it is that Allah is not Jehovah of the Bible. He's the moon god that Muhammad's grandfather worshipped.
That's why the crescent moon is so.
Yeah. The crescent moon is there because that's Allah. He's the moon god.
That's their cross and
Yeah.
Star of David. basically.
So, yes, the Jews are worshiping Jehovah. They just don't realize who the Messiah is. They either don't or don't want to realize who the Messiah is. But the Muslims do not even, follow Jehovah God. They follow Allah, the moon god. So, a false god. So they're not an Abrahamic faith. They're a satanic faith. Of course, then that marks you as being an Islamophobe because you dared say that they're not an Abrahamic faith, that they're not a religion of peace. Now you're
And 2 plus
no,
2
you're-
is not 5. And
right.
guys, no matter how much they mutilate themselves, won't be girls.
see,
But we're just so, narrow-minded.
you're just phobic about these things. But
I was listening to a YouTube, Rabbi Zacharias,
mhm,
talking about, his response to questions like, why is Christianity right? How do you know that Christianity is the one true worldview? He talked about worldview. Let's answer these 4 questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. The 3 tests for truth are logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. I gotta look up what all that stuff means.
read that list again.
The worldview must answer 4 questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny.
Okay, origin, meaning, morality, and destiny.
And he says 3 tests for truth are: is it logically consistent? Is it empirically adequate? And is it experientially
Experientially,
relevant?
Now, see, the left would just looking at that last part on the test for truth, the left would reject all of that and say, "How do you feel about it?"
Yeah.
Well, I just feel there should be a P in the word hamster because that's the way I spell it. So therefore, you can give me all of the logic and all of the experiential stuff. You can give me all that stuff. You can show me the dictionaries, everything, but I still won't believe it because I don't feel that way. It doesn't make me
Not
feel
believe in the
good.
law of gravity and jump off the tall building. Please, every single one of them.
Well, they might feel bad when it doesn't cooperate.
Anyhow, he went on to say, because he debates sometimes Muslims, and it's one debate he had. They were up there on some debate stage somewhere, with an interpreter between some sheep. And see, the Muslims don't believe Jesus died on the cross. He
Right.
didn't resurrect.
In fact, they say that specifically in the Quran that if you believe that, you're an infidel.
But when he recounted all the history, it's closer to the time of the events than anything the Quran comes up with. And, the Romans said it, and pagans said it, all kinds of stories way back, close to the event, saying he died on a cross.
Right.
Finally, his debater, Sheikh, said, we come to the point that Muslims have to realize he did die on a cross. The question they have to ask is why? That's a big, these guys say, why did he die on the cross?
Yeah, if you can get a Muslim to admit that, yes, Jesus died on the cross, because the moment he does that, he has to question the Quran. I think Ron specifically says that he didn't.
And he asked, Bobby asked him if he could photo on that, and the guy said yes. That's, pretty amazing. If you just, enter in, how do you know that Christianity is the one true worldview? That's one part of his answer to that question.
Okay, let me type that in a second here.
We come up with some simple examples to every one of those technical answers of his, because I need examples.
You said, how do you know that Christianity is the one true?
The one true worldview. And Zacharias answer, Rabbi Zacharias answer.
Okay, get that run there a second, but.
I wonder why they put it that way, instead of saying one true religion.
Well, worldview covers more than just religion, philosophy, all that kind of stuff as well. You know, just the way of how do you view the world? Because how you view the world might affect, what religion you follow.
Well, how do you feel?
Every worldview has to answer these same 4 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can go along with a whole lot of it and not conform to Christianity.
Right, right. Let me see here.
And he talked about how Jesus' example was, his purity was unmatched, unique.
It's 9 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Shall I send you the link?
I have it right here.
Okay.
Yeah, there's several links to it.
Another response he did was one to the question of why is Christianity right? He gets stuff in there.
Let me.
Where did you get all this?
I just, Robbie, because a neighbor I got was friendly, I shared him the Mully movie. You heard of the Mully movie? He says, "Oh, I know a guy that's doing that, and he liked it. He likes helping people, helping the kids." There's a guy in the U.S. that's doing all he does in Kenya as far as outreach to these kids. And he's a Hindu, but he's taken Catholic education, so, but he says, "I'm not religious." I says, "Well, I'm not religious either. I believe in a relationship with Jesus rather than a religion." But I said, "You need to listen to Rabbi Zacharias. He's Indian born, but a Christian."
Oh, that's who you're talking about, right? Yeah, I've seen,
I was talking to my neighbor about this, so I'm looking up Robbie. What can I get Robbie says that I could share with my neighbor? Who's a real friendly guy.
He's on TV quite often.
Oh, he's something else.
So you like him then?
Robbie?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good materials.
He has a whole team of, what are those people called?
He the one that brought up at the thief on the cross how easy it is to believe in Christ and to be saved, because that guy brought nothing. I mean, he didn't do anything. He was
Is he the
saved
one that does the?
that moment in
No,
time.
is Riley the one that does the street walks talking about trying to get people to realize that they're sinners?
No, that's the,
No, that's,
the Australian
Ron
guy.
Comfort, yeah,
Ron
that's
Comfort.
that's Ron Comfort.
Ray Comfort.
Or Ray Comfort, yeah. That's right.
Robbie had a whole team of, not evangelists, what's the other word when you, not evangelism.
I think that was who was talking about.
Apologists. He has a whole team of speaker apologists. Nabil Qureshi wrote a book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. And he was brought up a devout, peaceful Muslim, and a sect that was very peaceful. And when 9/11 happened, he had to confront that, what's my religion all about,
Yeah, because
And
they said everybody was cheering around the world when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just like,
Nabil, I was in a debate team with, at some college, and they paired up for these weekend debating things, and his roommate was a Christian. He said, "Oh, here's my chance to witness and beat down another Christian," because they always wilted. Well, this guy, the debate team, didn't wilt. He had answers about, the Bible's corrupted and all this kind of stuff. He had all the facts backed him up. And he started a 3-year back and forth about faith and Christianity. And eventually he says, all the logic is there for Christianity, but he's thinking about separating from his family, because if he makes the big break, it's like you're not part of the family anymore, all this kind of stuff. God, if you want me, he says, I need something, I need a vision, or he had 3 dreams, and he's in the book. He wrote a book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, and he was a very young apologist, and he did well. He debated against, when he became a football, he was on the Robbie's team, and he was debating.
Yusuf,
Debating,
you ever hear of him?
what's the name? But
He
this
was
guy,
Egyptian born, he was Muslim.
yeah. But this, Nabil Qureshi, he eventually got cancer.
Yeah, he's passed away.
He knew he was going, he had a year left, and he, on his deathbed, he was witnessing for Jesus. And he was thinking ahead for everybody else, It's just amazing. And the original guy, who was the first point of contact that didn't back down, he says, think about the response. He's still around. And he says, think about this guy's response. On his deathbed, was he cursing everybody? No, he was trying to pass along his faith in Jesus, everybody, instead of cursing everybody like Muhammad did.
Yeah.
Did he do that?
Yeah, he was poisoned by the Jewish slave girl.
Right.
That's how Muhammad died,
Yes.
poisoned by.
Yeah.
Well, this is what happens when you kill someone's family and you let them prepare your food.
Yeah.
You rape them, you enslave them, okay.
And then let them fix your food, yeah.
Well, guess what her worth was after that? Not much.
Yeah, she may have been dead before he was.
Maybe.
Oh, I might be tempted to ask the Muslims, oh, it's so great and wonderful. How come Muhammad was poisoned by a Jewish slave girl? Why didn't Allah let him know this was gonna happen?
Yeah.
Why didn't Allah prevent it?
Okay.
No,
The guy that you were talking with that he had as his debate partner is David Wood,
Yeah,
Who has-
it would.
Ministry
your
Acts, Acts 17 Apologetics.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I think I have a link to him in the website where he's talking about the Quran teaching that the sun sets in muddy spring.
Yeah.
But he and David Wood for a while were going into that Dearborn Festival, or
Oh,
Islamic
Is
Festival
that
in
the guy
Dearborn,
that,
Michigan.
they kept chasing him out and
Yeah, they
he'd
did
asked
chase
the
it.
police to help him and they said, no, you gotta go. We can't protect you. It's just like,
Mhm. Yeah, and they were doing it
oh.
peacefully and they respectfully. They were asking questions because they had booths, ask a question, ask a Muslim a question, ask questions about Islam. Okay, let me ask you a question. Get out of here.
Yep.
And so, unlike there were some other people that came there and tried to bring in a pig's head, right in the midst of a Islamic festival, it's certainly not the way to get people to listen to you.
Well, what the pig hated,
The Muslims are, if you touch pigs contaminated with pork or pig's blood or anything, you can't go into paradise. Pigs are the most filthy thing in the world, almost as bad as a Christian or a Jew.
That's the, let's see, that's that copycat that he's gonna use when he takes over.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to find a little bit more on that guy, but they've got acts17.net. That's the website for David Wood and their Acts 17 ministry that they have. Acts 17 Apologetics. I haven't looked at them in a while, so there's a lot there. Mine or yours? Both of ours. Yeah, that whole idea of apologetics, it's not apologizing for Christianity. That's not apologizing for what you believe. It's giving the reasons for why you
Why do
believe
they
it.
use that word though? Because it sounds.
Yeah, well, originally an apology was, I'm giving a reason for why I did this. I'm giving a reason for why I messed up. I'm giving a reason for why I failed. So apologies are giving a reason. So, see, when you look at a lot of words, just like when we were earlier in 1 Thessalonians, shall not prevent them, and it's not talking about hold them back, it's talking about going before, but in a sense, it's we're not going to keep them from being first in the resurrection. That's more what it is. See, so you can see how it's not going to keep them from being first, how that keep them from being, so you can see where we've kind of taken off just the keep from idea from that, the restraining aspect. But keep them from going first means we won't precede them. So, but yeah, I have to look up the word origin of apologetics. I'll use dictionary.com, even though, that lady really disagrees with their spelling of hamster. So. Apologetics. It's considered a branch of theology concerned with the defense or proof of Christianity. But the word origin Should be here somewhere. Where's its word origin? Yeah, it comes from apologia, which means a defense or justification of a belief or idea. Coming from the Latin. The LOG part of it, the same as logic. So logic meaning reason. And the APO part of it is a prefix.
And a lot of people don't
Oh,
listen
derivative
to
in a
logic.
sense.
That's why
Yeah.
there's so many on the left. All feeling.
It's kind of odd that they sit there and they, what the Muslims say about the sun going down into a swamp, yet, you know, if you've ever, when I had cable, they had, NASA had their own channel, and you could actually sit there and you could watch the space missions as it was being filmed from the space shuttle. And you just sit there and then all of a sudden, oh, look, there's the sun. I don't think it's going into a swamp today. You know?
One would think that with all their money, you know, the Saudis, for instance, being big proponents of Wahhabist Islam, would have funded at least one documentary to the swamp to watch the
Yeah.
sun go down. And especially since Alexander the Great was supposed to actually see it. If he could find it, surely NASA could find it. But
It's odd that he would be born in the 5th century and all this other stuff happened, you know, thousands of years before he was born. So how do they, how do they connect the dots on something like that?
well, I mean, where he was, they had a lot of people coming through that area, and in Mecca they had these shrines set up to all the various gods of people who came through there, so that helped ensure the peace.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just became convinced that Allah, the moon god, was the supreme god, which is kind of interesting because in most other cultures it was the sun god that was considered the supreme god.
Yeah, because without the sun, nothing grows.
But it was all because he had a vision in a cave where he thought initially an evil spirit was troubling him, and it was his wife that said, "Oh no, it's a good spirit," and that's where he became convinced. At least that's how the story goes, because Allah never wrote anything down at all. Allah was completely illiterate. He didn't write anything. Or I'm sorry, Muhammad.
Allah
I'm
never
sorry.
wrote anything
Yeah,
either. 'cause it doesn't
Allah didn't
exist.
either. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Muhammad was in the cave, and his wife, convinced him that he was being visited by a good angel, not an evil spirit. And so that just one thing led to another, and then Othman came along, the third caliph, I believe it was, second after Muhammad, and he collected all of the known